Okay, we'll start. Yeah. Okay. So this is a period of growth. I mean, all year round we're supposed to be growing. All year round we're supposed to work on ourselves. It's HaShavua is a time that we're supposed to be focused on rectifying that which we do wrong the rest of the year. But we know that this specific time of year is a specific time for growth. Sefiras HaOmer, the time of Pesach. Pesach is man cherusenu. It's the time that we're supposed to break away, become free of that which holds us back. And as the Gemara refers to Exile, it's the seor shebeisa. It's like the yeast in the dough. A little bit of yeast causes inflation, things to rise and become much more than they actually is. We remove that in the matzah on Pesach to give us ourselves a fresh start in terms of being able to achieve our personal potential and our national potential, and ultimately cherus for the entire world, freedom for the entire world. It doesn't end up being what we like it to be. I mean, for the most part, it's almost like just the opposite. It's like it's man shibutzenu. Basically, between the cleaning for Pesach and the cooking during Pesach and the limitations of what you can and can't do. You can't go to restaurants. You can't do the same things you might do, let's say, during Sukkot or other times of the year, but somehow that's supposed to be more of a liberating reality, and it culminates in Shavuos. It's the prerequisite. It's what's crucial for Kabbalas Torah. And Chazal have a nice little way of reminding us what we're trying to achieve at this time, where we're going, what the end goal is supposed to be. We know there's 49 days of Omer from Pesach until Shavuos. Shavuos is the 50th day itself. And 50 always represents the idea of being lamala min teva, breaking out of the physical, source of oppression that keeps us back from being who we're supposed to be. And if you take and Lag BaOmer, which is coming up this Motzi Shabbos, is kind of like a break in that period of time. We know that the break exists for a couple of reasons, primarily because that's what the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, according to one shita, the main shita, that's when the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. They had begun to die after Pesach until Lag BaOmer. That was the day they stopped. Also, that was the day that the Rashbi, Rabbi Pinchas Winston, was Megala the Zohar. That's when he revealed the Zohar, which is a little unusual that we should celebrate that because for the most part, most people don't learn it, and they're even afraid of it to some degree because we've been told you can't open it up. Should learn till you're the age of 40, married, has some background, and of all the things that we celebrate the course of the Jewish year, celebrating the revelation of the Zohar, a sefer that most people don't even have much connection to, is a little bit unusual. But that's what we say. It was a day of Gilu, which is also amazing because Lag BaOmer, it's like the 33rd day of the Omer. That's all it means, Lag BaOmer, right? So there's obviously some significance, but it turns out that being the 33rd day of the Omer, so you have 32 days up until that point in time, which is the gematria of the word leiv, right? And then if Lag BaOmer breaks up after stops the that period of time. The next period of time, it's like a threshold to the next period of time, and the next amount of days totals 17, which is the gematria of the word tov. So Chazal explained that's really what we're after. We're trying to get a leiv tov over this period of time. The combination of all the work we're doing, or supposed to be doing, the growth we're supposed to achieve, is to achieve the level of what we call leiv tov. It sounds very simple. In Pirkei Avos, that's considered to be the ultimate midah the person can actually achieve, because whatever other good midas you have to develop somehow emanates out from having a leiv tov. And that's the reason why, at this time, Rabbi Akiva students were nifter, because they were doing the same thing all year round. It wasn't that this began after the first day of Pesach to have sinas chinim or at least kinos, a kina in a negative way, but this was a midah amongst his Talmidim the entire time. And he was the one who says, Klal Gadol b'Torah, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. So you can't have a Rebbe who says that, emphasizes the reus amongst people, and then have Talmidim who don't have that reus. So even though that was they were no hig to be that way all year round, nevertheless, the period of time where Kodesh Baruch Hu took them to task was at this time, because this is the time specifically we're developing a leiv tov. The rest of the time we're working on ourselves all year anyhow, and obviously leiv tov is a goal no matter what time of year. But this is the period of time specifically we're supposed to achieve it, and that's why if you look at the luchos, very often people draw the luchos where they're being held together in the shape of a heart, because that is really what we're trying to achieve. It's a prerequisite for Kabbalas Torah. To receive Torah is to achieve that level of Leiv Tov. And the Torah itself makes this point by pointing out that that Bnei Israel, by the time of Kabbalas Torah, they achieve this fantastic level of Kishuch HaBalev Echad, like this, like a single Jew with a single heart. The Torah speaks about the Jewish people in the singular, and Chazal asks, why doesn't it say V'yachanu tachas ahar neged ahar? Why, as I mentioned, the plural, but it says V'yichen tachas ahar, which refers to a single individual. He camped at the base of the mountain. So Chazal explained, because to tell you that at that moment in time the Jewish people achieved unity, tremendous unity. And, considering we have jokes like 2 Jews and 3 opinions and 3 Jews and 6 shuls and all these type of things we can, talk about the machlokes, it's a significant thing. So it's almost like the Torah is saying, almost as important as Kabbalas Torah, which is a fantastically important event, was the fact that Jewish people got along with each other, which brings the last time in history, for the most part. From that point onward, it's been basically fighting and machlokas and disagreement. There's never been a period of time of unity like that. That was the power of Kabbalas Torah, to be able to achieve that level of unity. But it was more to do with the Omer itself, and the concept of 50, and the sphere, the counting, it's all tied into that. And the truth is, the process actually begins back on the seder, obviously, and that's the reason why the next day we start the counting of the Omer, because whatever was achieved at the seder is being continued through the Omer from that point onward. Because Leil Seder, Chazal explained that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts a special koich into the world, into the Olam, that allows us to achieve things that we can't do on our own all year round. It's a special matana. In fact, they explained that all year, the rest of the year, on every Chag, you have to do something to bring the light to you. On Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, on Shabbos even, the rest of the year, you have to do something spiritual, something that sets you up and is mechin, you, prepares you to be able to draw down the light. The same way if you daven, you're drawing down light. You do mitzvah, you're drawing down light. That's what we're going to do. Or lagoyim, it means to draw down the light for ourselves and the rest of the world. All year round, if you don't do something to bring the light down, the light won't come down to you necessarily. It might come into the world, but not to you. The only time that the light actually comes down on its own, without you doing anything, is Leil Seder, until Chatzot. By the time the 3 stars come out, says the Chochavim, until Chatzot, which is why they have become us, we finished by Chatzot, is because that's the opportunity when HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts the light into the world, which is ironic, because of all the Chagim, of all the days of the year, where we actually do something, it's Leil Seder. Rosh Hashanah, you daven for an hour, whatever, mostly Erev Rosh Hashanah, you daven, and you come home and do the school, it's Simanim, basically, and you're finished. Maybe you'll learn a little bit Mishnais that night, but for the most part you're finished. Right? Go to bed early, whatever. Right? Yom Kippur, the same thing as well. There's not much to do besides the tefillah itself. And Shabbos we have activities, but not that complicated. Kiddush, Motzi, some Zmiris, Divrei Torah. That's the end of it. The one night of the year where we're doing so much to create an atmosphere and to trigger something in Shemayim is Leil Seder. The Haggadah is the most complicated, complex activity the Jewish people get into in terms of the Chagim. And that's the one night it's supposed to be free. The one that it's supposed to come down no matter what you do in the year. So it should be, you can just sit there at the table, just say, I'm ready, send me the light, give me my portion already. But we don't do that instead. So Chazal explained that to make sure that you're in the right place at the right time, you're osik in the Haggadah the entire night. They made it that you would be there the entire night because you get distracted. Someone says to you, there's a person going on going around in the neighborhood from door to door giving it $100. Whoever opens the door, right? What time is he coming? We have no idea. But he'll be there. He's in your neighborhood, your door, your neighbor calls up from down there and says, he was just by my house, just gave me $100, right? Fantastic opportunity, right? But you're not going to stand by the front door the whole day, right? On the other hand, you don't want to miss it, right? So you're kind of hanging around the door, but you might do the bathroom, you might do the laundry, All of a sudden, what happens if, he comes to your door at that one moment that you went downstairs for 1 second to turn the dryer on, and he walks away. Right, so it's not enough just to have the opportunity. You have to also be there, at the right, the right moment, the right time. So the Haggadah is structured in such a way not to draw the light down, but just to make sure you're there to receive it and makabel it. There's one time I'm always worried that my biggest concern about going on these trips is that it's like almost a ruse to get me out of the country. the Mashiach is going to come, dafka, when I'm not there. I'm waiting, when's he going to finally come? And the one time I go out of the country, I get stuck in Chutz La'aretz, he's going to come. There was a time when at the airport, we went to pick up my in-laws. They're coming back from New York, and it was before they renovated the airport and built a whole new airport. But it was the other, I think it was now called Terminal 1 or something. But we're waiting, and there were 3 or 4 major flights that came at the same time. So tons of people were coming out. And you have this big viewing screen where you can watch the people coming out. They're all coming up, and you know how it goes. If you bring your sefer, you never open it up. If you don't bring your sefer, you want to open it up. That's usually the way it goes. So I was trying to decide what to do. At the last second, I foolishly left it back in the car, and sure enough, they did not come out on time as we had hoped they would, and all kinds of people are coming out, and it gets boring. I just couldn't handle just standing there looking at all the people come out one after the other. And there was something else going on in the Knesset at that time. I can't recall exactly what it was, but I thought, Damascus is over here. I'll just go for 5 minutes, just literally 5 minutes, take a look at the headlines, and come back. And more than likely, the odds are that they're still not going to be in at that point in time. And I literally was 5 minutes in Damascus. And I came out, I'm looking around, and I can't see anyone from my family anywhere. I'm looking all over the place, I'm going back and forth, because I'm thinking to myself, there's no way they're already out. And if they're already out, how did they miss me? Like they left without me in the end, Shows you how important I was. And I'm looking around back and forth, and I can't see them anywhere. So I thought, okay, well, let me just for the fun of it, just take a look outside. And I go outside, and they're like 100 yards all the way on the way to the parking lot. And I can't even figure out how time-wise, because I was definitely only in that store for 5 minutes looking at the headlines, and they were already on the way to the parking lot, and no one noticed I was missing whatsoever. I thought to myself, I'm catching up to them. I thought, that's exactly my concern about Mashiach. You're waiting, you take your eye off the ball for just 1 second, you look away, you get distracted, you're not really focused, for that one moment, and boom, it happens, and you miss the entire thing. Same thing by Leil Seder, that you have to be focused the entire time. That's one aspect. And if you're not going to be focused, you won't be able to receive the light that comes down, and which is supposed to start you on your path towards spiritual growth. But that's almost, in a sense, the secondary message. The primary message has to do with the Haggadah itself. In fact, that based upon this whole discussion, it occurred to me that our whole approach to the Haggadah itself is not exactly correct, because for the most part, we take down the Haggadahs once a year because we're very careful to make sure they stay kosher to Pesach. And we open them up Leil Seder, and almost everyone enjoys the Haggadah, enjoys the Seder, and everyone gets a big kick out of it. But we go whatever time we go, and then we close it up and put it away until next year. Maybe you might use it as a bench the rest of Pesach, but how many people, when was the last time you sat down, took the Haggadah the next day, and did Chazorah and reviewed it? You ever do that before? Right? Say, that was a real fun part last night. There's times I thought to myself, we're going too fast through this section, but the kids are tired, and the food's cooking, it's like getting late. Let's put that aside for the time being, and tomorrow I'm going to go back and review them. I even had ideas where, I had this fantastic idea where the next day we'll do a mini seder at lunch. Nothing too complicated, nothing too, the kids only have so much patience for things, but take a section of the Haggadah that we didn't do as well as I'd like to do it, and do it the next day when there's less pressure. I was vetoed across the board. She's like, nobody wanted that. You want the Torah, you want to talk about, you want to have chazon on your own, go ahead, do that. But the whole family, it's like sacrilege to do the Seder twice, although the truth is the first line to do it anyhow, twice. You get a second shot. Forgot about that already, Yeah. But it's not the same thing. I participated in seconds, I grew up a second Sedarian, but I participated even after I moved there to Israel. It's not the same thing. It's not the same as the first night. There's something like missing, this kind of a tom, the anticipation. It's not the same thing as the first night. And I thought to myself, really, that, it's a mistake, because the truth is the Seder, the Haggadah, is what we're supposed to be doing all year round. It's the same thing by the Vidui in Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, you sit there going, because of this, And I'm saying to myself, if I would just look at this Vidui a few times a year, maybe next year I would not hit my chest as hard. I still got bruises from last year, as hard for the Averas that I did, which I said last year I would do again, and here I am again once, doing Vidui. If I would do Vidui
perhaps not every day, because people do vidui every day.
Right.
You
I
know.
was going to say we have this.
Yeah, it doesn't help. In fact, it's one of the most. It's the fastest part of tefillah sometimes. You know, and but still, you know, you think about it. When I was in yeshiva, we used to have these things called tshuva groups, where you got together 30 days in advance for Rosh Hashanah, and you schmoozed out different ideas, and you tried to inspire one another to do tshuva. But if you did that every single day, I mean, that's what Musar is supposed to be about in the end. Musar is supposed to be about somehow, you know, continuing on the experience of Yom Kippur all year round to a large degree. But the Haggadah certainly deserves much more time. That's one thing. The other thing is people have it wrong to some degree. Who's the main star of the Haggadah? Who's the main star? A little lower down. A little lower. In the Haggadah itself. He's not even mentioned in the Haggadah. Right? You think he would be the main star, but he's not. No, of the characters in the Haggadah, of the entire story, who's the main character?
Well, there's Paro.
Love it.
Not
There's Paro, and then there's the Gittin.
That's true, but I'm not talking about the Exodus story. I'm talking about the Haggadah itself. In the way the Haggadah is structured and set up, the way we do it, the way we read it, who is the main character?
People who are reading the Haggadah.
The children?
The generations to come.
That's too sophisticated.
sons?
I need something simpler. Don't try and be smarter than the question over here. Just very simply, when you think of the Haggadah, right? Who do you think of, you know, in terms of like the main character?
Well, Hillel invented the sandwich, so.
That's not the main character.
That's his name.
Oh, that's your
I was
name.
hungry by that point.
Maxwell House.
Maxwell House.
That's right, there you go.
Who's the main character in the Haggadah?
Children.
The we.
We're getting closer.
Moshe.
The sons?
That's what I'm saying. Before no Moshe that mentioned.
The parents?
The parents? No, in the Haggadah. In the Haggadah itself. In the story of the Haggadah. Sorry?
Bnei Israel.
That's in the story, but I mean in the Haggadah night. You know, the actual seder. Don't look at the story. Look at the, like, you know, in the process of the things that we do. You know, yes. Well, we are, but I'm talking about in just the Rasha.
Oh.
The Rasha. He's the main star of the whole Haggadah. No one wants to hear that, but he's the one who stands out the most. No, the Chacham is barely mentioned. He just says, you know, what are all these mitzvahs and these mitzvahs for chukim edus that Hashem Elokeinu, you know, Elokecha commanded us to do, and you teach him everything until you know you can't eat after the Afikoman, and that's the end of him, right? He's like the Tom, barely noticeable. Eno, your daily show, barely noticeable. Who's the one that stands out the most, right, in the story? Thank you. Right? It's the Russian. Ma avodas v'sos lechem. He asked a question, and we make a big thing of it, right? What does this avodah mean to you? And because he excludes himself, so we exclude him, we tell him, we break his teeth, we tell him that had you been there, we go really far with this too. We don't simply break his teeth, we even project backwards and say, because of that question, I mean, does that question really bother you that much, by the way? Are you really bothered by that question as much as the Baal Haggadah is bothered by it? He asked, what does avodah mean to you? And you break his teeth because of this? And you even go one step further to say that had you been there back in Mitzrayim, at the time they were leaving, you would have been part of the 4/5 that did not leave Mitzrayim. What did I do? What did I say? What did I ask? And I just want to know, what does this avodah mean to you? So the Brisker Rav says, when he asked that question, because he's bothered by this, what's the big deal over here? So he says, Ma avodah says lechem. When he says lechem, and the Haggadah says lechem v'lo lo, it doesn't mean obviously in the pshat level means lechem to you v'lo lo, not to the Rosh himself. But the Brisker Rav says no, lechem v'lo lo, to you but not to him. Right? This Korban Pesach business, he's not disagreeing that at one time in history the Korban Pesach was important. He agrees as part of the. He is sitting at the seder. Right, he is doing the seder over here. He's not like, you know, someplace else downtown and totally, you know, disenfranchised and cut off from the Jewish people. He's at the seder doing this entire thing. But he's asking a question: what does the Korban Pesach mean to you? He's not saying it never meant something to anybody. He says to you right now. Why? Because a long time ago in Mitzrayim, when the Jewish people were, Ovdav Azar, as the Medrash points out, which meant they were involved in the Egyptian idol worship, and one of which was a goat, and they had to make a point that they were no longer attached to the Egyptian way of thinking. So part of making the break was to bring in the Egyptian gods and the sacrifice and the whole thing. He says, fine, Beseder, but who worships amongst the Jewish people today? You want to bring a US dollar bill and shecht it? No problem. You want to bring a fancy car and shecht that? Okay, that's relevant to our generation. Mm-hmm. But an animal, Korban Pesach, what's the relevance in that? What meaning do you find? He's not saying you can't do it. He's not saying that you shouldn't be doing it. He's saying don't imply I have to do it too. Don't say it's what all Jews have to do what we're all about. And so we break his teeth and we tell him that had you been in Mitzrayim, you wouldn't have gone up, because that question implies something that undermines not just the purpose of what it means to be Klal Yisrael, but undermines the whole point of Ma'aseh Bereishis again. In those few words, when he asked that question. And the truth is that what's really going on is that's the Rasha asking the question of Haggadah, but it's really the Baal Haggadah, the author, or authors, whatever, of the Haggadah, asking you the same thing. That's the question you're supposed to answer that night throughout the seder. Ma havos asos lechem. What is this avoda that we're doing tonight, Leil Seder, Pesach night? What does it mean to you? How do you interpret this thing? What are you going to get from this thing? Is this simply tradition because every year you sit down and have matzah Leil Seder and go through this entire process and experience and try to hand over the education to the children and achieve some kind of connection to the past, a commemoration? Or is it much more than that? Because that's the question you have to answer. How many people ask themselves that question that night? What would you answer? What is it? What does the avoda mean to you? What does a seder? What does the Haggadah mean to you? What does it mean to you? Volunteers? So maybe I'll tell you what it's supposed to mean. What it's supposed to mean. We have been in exile for thousands of years. Not only have we been in exile for thousands of years, but for the most part we only know exile. The periods of redemption have been very small, very short, right? Even the one we came back from Bavel, in Mordechai's time, Esther's time, which was supposed to have been the final one, failed. The Zohar says that was supposed to be the last one. No more exiles after that. That was supposed to be the final redemption. If the Jewish people come back en masse, this is the well springs of Chachma had opened up in the Shemayim to facilitate this final redemption. Ezra came back, everybody came back at that time. But the Jewish people, a large contingent, decided to stay in Bavel, and because we stayed in Bavel, the well springs closed up once again, and we maintained our galus status ever since. The second base of Mikdash was not the first base of Mikdash. We were missing on our Kaddish. We never got back to things we were hidden. Didn't have the same status, the same level of Kedusha, and we've never recovered since then. It was built by Herod in the end, and it was destroyed, and v'chulu v'chulu. Even the first base of Mikdash, the Gemara says that the night. Well, actually, the Gemara said the Medrash says it, but the Gemara only says that when Shlomo HaMelech married Bas Paro, right? He married the daughter of Paro, and apparently he married her the very night he finished building the first base of Mikdash. The very night. There's a reason for that. He wasn't simply, you don't just go out and marry, the daughter of Paro the night you finish the base of Mikdash because that's what you feel like doing. He knew that when he finished the first base of Mikdash, the world was very close to world rectification. And since he was who he was, extremely intelligent and qualified individual, he thought he could finish the job off by bringing the tzotzim sparks into the Klal Yisrael, and that was a major repository, Mitzrayim, still of some of those sparks, and he had a cheshbon, but he was wrong about it. He made a mistake, almost cost him everything, and the Gemara says that when he married Bas Paro, that's when the reed was already there from David Melch's time, from Mephibosheth, right? That's when I think Gabriel came down, put stones around it, and it became Rome. Became the island of where Rome was going to be. Which means basically, when he married Bas Paro on the night that he was doing the Chanukah Beis HaMikdash Rishon, he was already putting to creation the means to destroy Beis HaMikdash Sheni. It's phenomenal. Forget about the first Korban. The second, we're not even talking, the building yet. The second, the means for the second Beis HaMikdash was already, being put to Ma'aseh Bereshis from this act that he was doing to destroy the second temple. Which means even when we came so close to Gula Shlema, we came so close to achieving this fantastic level of redemption for all of the Jewish people and all of mankind. It didn't last very long. Moments, literally moments, before the whole thing came apart. And we've been exiled for the most part ever since Adam HaRishon. In fact, he was the first person to actually experience Galus, exile, because he was the first person to actually experience redemption. Mankind was created in the Geula. Even though we're used to Galus, we're used to exile because that's where we've been now for thousands of years. And even we have redemption if we still go back there. Anyhow, the Hanukkah redemption, for example, the time of Hanukkah, it lasted like 25 short years, and even then it wasn't so much a Geula. Then before she asked the question, what was really achieved in the end? Because very shortly there was a civil war between the two warring factions amongst Klal Yisrael. They invited the Romans to come in to quell it down. They said they took over, and Pompey came and destroyed everything just started to collapse. But the first man, Adam HaRishon, was created into redemption, and that's what we're trying to recover. That's where we're trying to go back. Ultimately, it's Gan Eden, but even this world, basically, Gan Eden can be achieved on some personal level that we call Gula, and that's what we're trying to achieve, and that's what the Haggadah comes to bring. That's what Cherus is all about. It's not simply about having the freedom to make decisions on your own and do things when you want to do them, but it's about achieving this ultimate level that Adam HaRishon was created to be when he first came into the world. In fact, if you look, that the actual gematria of the word Adam is equal to Geula itself, because when a person is an Adam, Memela, automatically they're in Geula. What does that mean? So it means the following thing. The Kitzur, a very short version, basically. Kodesh Baruch Hu creates Adam HaRishon the 6th day of Ma'aseh Bereshis, and in the 6th hour he brings all the animals before him. And he says to Adam HaRishon, I want you to name the animals. The Torah says whatever he named them, that was their name. As opposed to what? That wasn't their name? Whatever he named, that wasn't their name in the end. He's playing some kind of game over here, charade. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, what's this one? It's an elephant. Wrong. What's it supposed to mean? Right? So the Medrash explains that Adam had, or Kabbalah explains really, Adam had the capacity to be able to look into the actual animals and see the essence of the midah that they represented, and therefore the name he gave it, because Hebrew words are more the conventions, to describe the essence of something, right? So he says, he calls it whatever he called it. The Kodesh Baruch Hu said, correct. That name describes the very basis of what this animal is supposed to be. So that's what the Torah means. Whatever he named it, that was its essence. That was what the thing actually was. So the Kodesh Baruch Hu turns to Adam HaRishon and says to him, so now, having done that successfully, what will you call yourself? Because don't forget, he had no wife at this point in time, so no one called him anything until now. So he says, what will you call yourself? He says, I'm going to call myself Adam. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, that's nice to the point. That's very, just 3 letters over there. Why Adam? So he says, because first of all, it will always remind me I came from the Adamah, that I have very humble beginnings. I have to always recall that as godly and as divinely as I can act, the reality is that I have to always remember that I'm a human being and I was taken from the dirt. My origin has to be always before me at all times to remind me that I have to be subservient to Kodesh Baruch Hu and be a humble individual. He said, but more importantly, it's an indication from the other perspective, and that is Adam is a tziruf. It's a combination of 2 parts. It's made up of the word dam, which is blood, which represents the physical, and an aleph, the letter aleph, which always alludes to Kodesh Baruch Hu because A represents the number 1, and B because an aleph is made up of 2 yuds and a vav, right? And 2 yuds and a vav, the gematria is 26, corresponding to yud k vav k. So Adam would always know and never forget that he is a combination of 2 realities, a physical body, with which we're all familiar, and a neshama, which is totally ruchani, because that's easy to forget. That was the whole machlokas in Noach's time, right? Do we service the body, or do we service the soul? And since no one has seen a soul, except usually the bottom of your shoes, maybe a fish might buy in the marketplace, but the actual soul itself, we don't see that so much at all. It's invisible completely. So how do you know it exists? How do you know it exists? So there's different things you can do to basically, provide evidence for its existence, because the body is not self-sacrificing, that's for sure. All nobility that mankind achieves is not come from the body. The body is not interested in nobility. It's not interested in becoming famous for good reasons. It's usually interested in becoming famous for the wrong reasons in the end. But the fact that we can do that, we can overcome the tzahar, the fact that we can act in noble ways implies there's some other element to us that goes beyond the physical body itself. And that's what Noach was, that's what he was basically, teaching the world, and the world disagreed. And the truth is, it's the basis of Western society too. The machlokus, the disagreement between us and ourselves on one level, and the Jewish people and the rest of the world, is that mankind is more than the physical body. There's a soul there too. And you have to service that, and if you don't service that, then basically, no matter how free you believe you are living in exile. You are a slave to the Yetzer Hara. And as long as they're both maintained, because you can't overly maintain the Aleph. If you focus too much on the Aleph part, the spiritual part, which is basically what cults do, and Eastern religions do, where they say, forget the physical world. It's corrupt. It's evil. I mean, the Catholic Church, for the longest time, said you couldn't get married. So how do you plan to propagate the species? It's a technical problem, right? So they came along and said, you can get married, but it's a sin, right? Mankind can go on through sin, right? But how do you sanction that? This is getting more complicated by the second. It's like, they kept fudging the whole thing,
You ever wonder why there were orphanages near nunneries?
That's the reason why. Yeah. And and then you have Eastern religions that basically have Buddhist priests and you have all these monks who live in these shrouds out somewhere in the Himalayas and the mountains, and they don't really get involved, or at least not that we can see, maybe behind closed doors they do things, but humans will be humans, but they cut themselves off from the physical world. That's not usually the problem in the Western world, right? That's not usually the problem over here in North America, in Canada, in the States, or England, or Europe. Usually it's the reverse. Usually we squash the Aleph, and we feed the Daled Mem, the physical part, the materialism, the Gashmias, the part that we enjoy, the cookies. It's like, that's not really for the soul, although you can try and justify it, but for the most part, that's feeding the body. Because you don't give the body a cookie, it ain't going to sit here tonight and listen to shir. That's how that's why Shabbos, that's what Shabbos is all about. Shabbos is basically, you have a very, very enjoyable physical experience, because when the body is, it's like a child. If you feed the child, you give him, something to enjoy himself, he'll sit there quietly for a good hour, 2 hours. Now they have those things, basically, where they, occupy themselves. But it's a payoff. And we're always struggling to try to maintain a balance. And a person who can maintain the balance between the Aleph and the Daled Mem is a free person. That person is in Geula. That's what the Gematria of Adam is equal to Geula. Take away the Aleph, and you have the word Dam, right? Which is when people start acting very dumb, right? and that corresponds to the word Gola, which is somebody who's in exile. Now, we know the Jewish people in Mitzrayim, what was the problem there? Too much Aleph or too much Dam? How do we know?
Or in the lowest level.
Right. Chazal tell us we were holding, before Makas Dam, we were holding a Mem Teshari Tuma. And this is Mitzrayim, right? Was Mitzrayim a spiritual place or a material place? A material place. Mem Teshari Tuma is when basically you're maxed out in terms of materialism. You're about as materialistic as you can possibly be before Kosh Baruch Hu takes you out of the world, because there's no purpose to have you in the world anymore. So when the Jewish people are holding my Mem Teshari Tuma, that would mean that the Aleph became very small. It got crushed. That's what Galus tends to do to the Jewish people, because we don't end up becoming like people living in the mountains. If anything, we tend to become better Greeks than the Greeks, better Americans than the Americans, better Canadians than the Canadians, because we absorb the material culture. That going back to Shittim, right? When the Jewish people think about the whole thing with Zimri and Cosby, that cost us 24,000, which corresponds, by the way, to 24,000 since Rabbi Kiva that died in this period of time. 24,000 the tribe of Shimon, 176,000 people were killed through capital punishment because of their involvement in avodah zarah, idol worship, all because people went shopping. It's remarkable. The Midianites brought linen. Jews like linen. I'm not exactly sure where that comes from, but Jews like linen. Do you like linen? Not like linen like bed sheets, but what do you call it? it says silk. They set up silk, merchants. They came over to buy some stuff, and they got pulled in through that. So the Jewish people tend to have less of a problem with being overly spiritual and too much of a problem with being overly material. So to be a memta shari tuma means the Jewish people sank down to the materialistic level of the Mitzrim. Now when that happens, you have competition, you have selfishness, all the bad midas come out. Is exactly the opposite of Ke'ishecha b'lev echad. Right? It's the opposite of a lev tov. Materialism kills people's goodness inside, makes them very competitive, unless you work very hard to balance it out. When you're super spiritual, so there's still room to be caring about other people. But when you become very materialistic, you become very you don't have the same level, the same elokus, same godliness as you do when you're supposed to have. Okay, so that's what the Jewish people are holding. We have to fix that. Kosh Baruch Hu says we have to rectify that. How are we going to do that? How are we going to rectify the Jewish people? But the first thing you have to do is tell them where they're holding, right? The first thing you should do is show a person, on what level they're actually holding in the end. When I was not religious all my life, to say the least. That at the age of 21, 22, that's when I started to get involved in Judaism, Yiddishkeit. It wasn't because of the fact that the life I was living at that point in time was bad or was lacking that much. I enjoyed what I was doing, but it just happened to be Hashgacha Pratis, divine promise. Kosh Baruch Hu, for reasons I don't understand this very day, was very generous and began to expose me to Judaism. And I remember making some very, very difficult sacrifices to become Shomer Shabbos and Shomer Kashrus and all these things. And after I made that commitment, I remember turning to Kosh Baruch Hu saying, you owe me. Okay, you owe me something because I didn't do this. I was happy with what I was doing. Millions of people, billions of people are doing this right now. I could have been perfectly content on my secular way of life. I was a pretty clean-cut kid as far as people go in that society. And I had business set up for me, and I made the sacrifice for the sake of truth. And then I went to yeshiva, and I learned for a year, and I realized what had actually happened over here and how it wasn't so much a sacrifice on my part, but on Kosh Baruch Hu's part for waiting so long till I got around to waking up to the truth. So I said, okay, maybe you don't exactly owe me something, but it's at least 50-50 over here. We're partners in this, right? I gave up something, and you gave up something. And then I learned for a couple years more. And when I finished learning for a couple years more, it's like, I can't believe you waited that long. If it was up to me, I would have destroyed me a long time ago. I owe you everything in the end. You have to appreciate where you're holding. To be able to do tshuva, you have to be able to, to realize where you've sunken down to, right? So what does the Kodesh Baruch Hu do? What's the first plague? Makas dam. Why? Well, to afflict the Nile River. Okay, so make it dry up, right? Put oil there, kill the fish. There's all kinds of things you can do. The biggest mistake we make is we think that the makos, the plagues, were for them, for the Mitzrim, but they weren't. If they were a failure. In fact, the Kodesh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu in Parashat Shmos, he says, you know something? I'm going to bring 10 plagues, in Mitzrayim. So, wow, 10, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, don't get so excited right now. You should know. They're not going to work. At least the first night. The first night, Paro is going to say, no, the entire way through. By Makkah's Bechoros, the last Makkah, the final Makkah in Mitzrayim, that's the one. Because Paro will lose his firstborn son, and he also is a firstborn. He'll finally relent and say, you can go out. So what should Moshe have said at that point in time?
Skip the first night.
What are we doing here? Right? If they're not going to, you're God. I don't know. If I am selling vacuum cleaners, I don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. What works with one neighbor may not work with the next neighbor. So I got to try everything I can, right? I tried that didn't work. I tried this, that didn't work, right? I don't know what's going to succeed over here to sell the vacuum cleaner. When I'm doing kiruv, I don't know what's going to convince you. So I try this and I try that, but you're God. You know the future. You know exactly what's going to work. So why don't we get the biggest bang for our buck over here, drop the first 9 plagues, go right to Makas Bechoros, and get out. Now, today, tomorrow. But Moshe doesn't say that, and history doesn't do that. Why not? Because the Makas were not about destroying Mitzrayim. They never were. Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to destroy Mitzrayim, he could do just like that. One little earthquake, a little shift in the ground. It's all it takes. And the third largest economy in the world is brought to its knees. That's it. That's all it took. They're still recovering. If they ever do recover in the end, it's going to affect the whole world, the global marketplace. One little earthquake. Could be a plague, could be a lightning strike, could be a dozen things at least, if not way more than that. Kosh Baruch Hu is creative when it comes to destruction. He's got all kinds of ways of doing it. So you can easily do Mitzrayim too. So why did Kosh Baruch Hu begin with Makas Dam and then go to Tzardea and the Dakinim and slowly and build towards Makas Bechoros? Because the plagues were never for the Egyptians. They were always for the Jewish people to build the Aleph. They're holding on Daled Mem Tashari Tuma. They can't go out of Mitzrayim yet because no matter where they go, they're always going to be in Mitzrayim. They could leave the borders of Egypt, but they won't leave the borders of Mitzrayim because they're two different things. They happen to be one and the same thing at that time, but they can be different in every generation. Mitzrayim, Kabbalah explains, is made up of two parts, the word Meitzer and Yam. A Meitzer is a border, it's a boundary that constricts. The Yam means sea, but it's the gematria 50, and therefore alludes to the Nun Shari Bina, the 50 gates of understanding, upon which Torah is based and built. And that's the basis of the relationship with Kosh Baruch Hu. So Mitzrayim is going to be any nation in history, at any point in time in history, that by definition constricts access to the Nun Shari Bina. At that time it was Egypt, but not after. And that's what the Haggadah makes this phenomenal request, or not request, demand. It says everybody is obligated. Not just they should do it, it's a nice idea, it's commemorative, but everybody is obligated, chayav, to look at himself as if he too is leaving Mitzrayim because he is. Because you are. In every generation you are. So you can leave Egypt, the Kosh Baruch Hu says, but you'll never leave Mitzrayim. And you're only free if you leave Mitzrayim, not if you leave Egypt. Because we see, remember Sharansky, people like that, they sat in Russian jails, and they were free people. They were physically incarcerated, but they had a certain spirit of freedom that people who were living outside the jails never do their entire life. Function of will, function of mentality. So Kosh Baruch Hu says, it's nice to take them out of Egypt, that I can do in a second, but leaving Mitzrayim is what you have to do. I can't impose, and I won't impose, that type of cherus on you. I can impose the physical cherus, but the psychological, mental, which is the main cherus, the main freedom, you have to do yourself. I can facilitate it, I can build it. So therefore, and the Pri Tzedek actually says exactly this, that every single plague that Kosh Baruch Hu brought in Mitzrayim increased the revelation of God in Ma'aseh Bereshis, and therefore expands the Aleph to the point that by Makas Bechoros, they get the Aleph back, and once you get the Aleph back, physical redemption happens de facto. Did you ever notice how the Jewish people didn't have to do anything to leave? They just Korban Pesach, Bris Milah, but they don't go to war. They don't have to, make demands. They're thrown out by the enemy. Like a Kosh Baruch Hu promised, they'll throw you at the end. Because when you achieve the level of an Adam, you become an Adam, Memela, automatically Geula is going to result. The reason why we're not in Geula today is because we just don't do that. We keep fighting physically, we try to achieve it through physical means, militarily speaking, but we're not becoming an Adam. So therefore history goes on and exile is prolonged. The first man was created in redemption. We're trying to get back to by becoming an Adam. And that's what Sefiras HaOmer is all about, becoming an Adam. So that's why you find that Kosh Baruch Hu literally removed 4/5 of the Jewish population by Makas Choshech in the end. Because if by that point in time you had not allowed the Makas to have impact on you and to reveal the Kosh Baruch Hu to you and realize it's time to go out, there was no reason to get to Makas Bechoros. Because by Makas Bechoros, the Haggadah tells us, Kosh Baruch Hu himself performed that Makkah. Ani v'lo malach. Ani v'lo saraf. If Kosh Baruch himself comes down to do a Makkah, there's no Bechir anymore. There's no free will. By Makas Bechoros, there was no free will anymore. The free will ended basically with the eighth Makkah. Because you see what happens. At first, Kosh Baruch Hu brings Makas Dam. So what do the Egyptians do? A very dumb thing. Literally, a very dumb thing. They turn the rest of the water into blood too. We can do that also. This was water 5 minutes ago. I don't want more blood. They did the blood. Take away the blood. They said we can make blood too. Genius, eh? Oops, that didn't work out so well. But they couldn't put it back into water because black magic has limited limit koiches in the world. It's called Kosh Baruch Hu, but there's rules by black magic that Or Chaim brings down. By Tzfardeya also, they also brought frogs, but already by Kinim. Kosh Baruch Hu was like taunting them. By Kinim, small little things. Black magic has no koich of things so small. What do the Chartumim say? What do the magicians say? Zu Espelokim. It could even be Mod, it was Yad Hashem, but they say Zu Espelokim. Can you imagine the thought, like an Av Tuma, on the 49th level of spiritual impurity, in a makom that's Av Tuma, it's like the ultimate in hiding a Kodesh Baruch Hu's Hashgacha, and the Egyptian magicians themselves, who are Tuma, beyond imagination, are forced to say, this is Elohim. This is Hashem. Well, actually, they don't say Hashem, but this is Elohim. Shows you the Gilui. And each one subsequently became more revealed, till eventually the Gilui was so strong, the Jewish people became an Adam by Makas Bechoros, and the Gula just takes place automatically on its own. And that's what's going to happen in history too. All that's going on today, all that's been going on for thousands of years of history, but will go on from this point onward even more so, is just to build the Aleph of Bnei Israel. And once the Aleph is built, we won't have to go to war, we won't have to fight militarily, there's almost nothing we're going to have to do, except Mamela, the Gula will come. Because when you're Adam, that's the result. But that raised, and that's fine. That's, you understand? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That kind of clear? Do you buy into that? You buy it? Right? Do you like that?
Possible?
It's actually an awesome idea. Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah, 100%. The only problem is it creates a huge kasha. Right? A major, major problem. Can you figure what that problem is?
It's like no matter, if you look at Shlomo HaMelech, who is as brilliant as anyone could possibly be, even he can make the mistake.
True. That is a big problem. That's not the one I'm looking for right now. Okay. I'm looking for a problem. I'm looking for a bigger problem to do with the story itself. This flies in the face. This flies. Just a little X on the table over here. This flies in the face of some very important concept that we've raised all of our lives and we bought into hook, line, and sinker. Literally, it's a contradiction of something we've been told the entire time. It's so fundamental to the whole seder. You know what that thing is? It's very simple. Just that I know the answer and you don't. The question is this: why do we eat matzah on the seder, not bread?
Well, two reasons. Because it's lechem honi, and also to remind us that we're in a hurry.
Okay, that's the second one's the main reason.
So.
Right, that's the main.
Okay.
That's the main reason. The other one's more philosophical, right? And the first, that's more practical. The second, that's the main one we're told. Okay, there wasn't enough time to bake bread. We left bechipazon. We couldn't make seder derech. I can't quite fathom what that means. When I'm rushing to the airport, I still have time to grab something along the way, and
But who has time to bake?
Well, the truth is that's also a problem because. I'm sure you've seen matzah being made before. You watch matzah being made? Nice, slow, calm process, right? People laid back, having a good time making those matzahs, right? Like a number. That's not what's going on, right? When people bake matzah, it's a frantic experience. It's like people are screaming and rushing around. It's like you feel, if you're not involved, you feel like really uptight and tense watching the entire process. Why? Because it takes 18 minutes. Leaving flour and water mixed together unworked to become chametz gamur. Nobody had 18 minutes in the process for a year. It wasn't like Moshe showed up and said, "We're leaving 15 minutes." Right? Drop your spades. For a year, they've been watching the systematic destruction of Mitzrayim. They knew the Gul was coming at some point in time. People are cooking food all the time, and certainly by Makas Bechoros they could feel that something was about to take place. And nobody had time to let water and flour sit for 18 minutes and become chametz. Just think. We'd be all the cleaning, no more. Because someone thought to make bread a little bit in advance. The problem by matzah baking bread is not having enough time. The problem is always having too much time. Clearly. Right? So what does it mean? So the question comes now, did we eat matzah because there wasn't enough time to bake bread? Or was there not enough time to bake bread, so we would eat matzah? See the difference in the questions? Right? Up until this whole discussion, everybody without the first thing, right? We eat matzah because there wasn't enough time to bake bread. But a little bit of an investigation and thinking through the reality, it's amazing what we take for granted and just take it straight. We just like eat it up. We're told, we're taught, we're fed these things, right? And and you got to think it through. Yeah, we eat matzah because of course Baruch Hu wanted us to eat matzah, as the Brisker Rebbe points out. Avram Avinu ate matzah on Leil Seder hundreds of years before there was a Jewish people in Mitzrayim. But we eat matzah because of course Baruch Hu made sure there would not be enough time to bake bread and break bread, that we should have matzah on Leil Seder. The question is why? Why is it so important? At first we thought it was incidental, a commemoration of what once took place. Now we're finding out it's ikari, it's very fundamental. So we're told that we had no time to bake bread. Why not? Why was there no time to bake bread in Mitzrayim? What was the problem? Why couldn't we stay a little bit longer? An hour, 2 hours, a day, a week, a month. We've been there for so long already. What's the difference? Why was there not enough time to bake bread? What are we taught? What are we taught?
We would have fell down.
We're holding Memtei Shari Tum like we said before, and one more second would have pushed us over the edge into 50, at which point we'd be literally spiritual oblivion. Do you ever try and move 6 million people out of some place? You ever try to move 5 people to some place? Get your family together, go on a vacation, or to go to the school, or go out for dinner someplace there. What's involved in getting a family together? How long it takes to get out of the house finally, right? I won't talk about wedding for your wife, but that's things take time, right? Things take time to move 6 million people, 3 million Jews, 3 million Arabs out of Mitzrayim, but nobody was stuck there for a few minutes more. What about the last guy? The first guys who got out, fine, they're free, but the last guys who got out, half a day later, maybe they fell to Nun Shari Tuma by the time they finally left. Okay, so maybe Kosh Baruch Hu arranged it that the first guy left early, so the last guy left exactly. What are we talking about over here? Second of all, if what we've been saying up until now is true, that every plague was a refuah for Klal Yisrael, that means by the time it got to Makkos Bechoros, not only would the Jewish people no longer only on Mem Shari Tuma, the 49th gate level of spiritual impurity, they were completely out of them. The Torah says they left B'yad Rama. When spiritual impurity is up, can spiritual purity be up to? No. When spiritual purity is up, can spiritual impurity be up to? No. They're opposites, right? So if there's Kedusha, Tumah is weak. Whenever Kedusha is strong in the world, Tumah doesn't have a fighting chance. If Tumah is strong, it means Kedusha is weak. On Leil Seder, the day of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Jewish people are leaving. Who's up and who's down?
It's that moment when we had that accessibility to that Kedusha.
But I'm saying who's up by Leil Seder, and the next day when the Jewish people are leaving, who's up and who's down?
The Jews are up.
The Jews are up. Is Kedusha up? Kedusha's up. Is Tumah down? Tumah's down. They come to power, they say, send these people out already. Kulan Meitim. We're all dead people. Egypt has been systematically destroyed. There's no Koach to Tumah anymore. At this point in time, the Jewish people are no longer teetering on Mem Teshar Tumah. That was backed by Makkos Dam. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu had not interfered in history early and brought the first plague, at that time we would have gone down to Nun Shari Tumah and been destroyed. But now, by Makkos Bechoros, after every Gilu of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when HaKadosh Baruch himself performs the final Makkah in Mitzrayim, and there's such a Gilu Shechina, there's no Bechir anymore, at this point in time, the Jewish people are holding by Nun Shari Kedusha. So the question now comes back. Why leave so quickly? See the question? Do you buy into that question?
It's a great question.
Thank you. It's not mine. I
We'll
wish
be back.
I could take credit for that question. It's not mine.
That makes you think, like, what have we been thinking all along?
Yeah, I was just
know?
as surprised as you were when I first saw it myself, but it's incredible. It's incredible. So now the question comes back, why did we have to leave so quickly?
No reason to stay.
There's no reason to stay. Well, the truth is there actually was a reason to stay. In fact, the Rizal says the whole point of going down to Mitzrayim was to raise the Egyptians to Nun Shari Kedusha, rather than us be dragged down to Nun Shari Tumah, or Mem Shari Tumah. So there was a reason to stay. In fact, had we stayed a little bit longer, something very dramatic would have happened, and that's why we had to leave early. What would have happened?
The shift would
What kind of shift?
changed. The balance.
To what? Back to Tumah again?
The Egyptians would have done Shuvah, you see?
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You're saying the opposite. You're saying that we would have lost that edge.
Yeah.
You don't know that. You're just guessing.
Yes.
Right. And you're saying the opposite, right?
So you said something dramatic.
Right. So it turns out that the reason we had to leave early was to save Paro, not the Jewish people. Was to save evil, not the good. Because the Jewish people had stayed 1 second longer, 1 hour longer, the hofa'ah, the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have been so intense that all evil would have been destroyed in the entire world. The entire world. If we'd stayed a little bit longer, we wanted to stay, we wanted to linger, we had a good time already, we were past the Mitzrayim. We left Mitzrayim early, this is what the Mefarshim say, not to say Bnei Yisrael, because we were already safe. The 4/5 were already gone, the 1/5 were already out of the Tumah, clearly, right? We had to leave early to save the Yetzer Hara. Which begs the question, why? Isn't that what's supposed to happen? I mean, the Gemara says in Sukkah, on Nun Beis Amud Aleph, at the end of the days, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take the Yetzer Hara, shecht it, bring it before the Tzaddikim and the Rishayim and say this and say that, basically. But at some point in time, Bechira stops, right? At some point in time, evil stops. Why do we have to save evil? So here is the answer of all the answers. The Haggadah is probing. We're probing, right? This is what the whole point of the Haggadah, the whole seder, we're probing for an answer. We're looking for the question, it's behind the question, which is behind the question. There's an underlying question, and yet the real question is, why are we still in Galus? If we think about it for a second, what a farce. The whole thing's a farce. Why? Because here we're talking about redemption in Galus. We're making a seder to celebrate the redemption of the Jewish people living in exile still. So the Haggadah is asking the question, why are you still in exile? Every year you're doing the seder, every year you're doing the Haggadah, you're reading the Haggadah and doing all this stuff over here. Why are you still in exile? That's what the Haggadah is asking. What's your answer to the question? So the story tells you why the HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to preserve the Yetzer Hara. Because you have to understand, in every generation, like we said before, there's always one nation that symbolizes the Yetzer Hara more than all the other nations. And if you destroy that nation, you destroy the Yetzer Hara too in the world. So that time was Mitzrayim. Today, take a look around, which is the greatest Yetzer Hara, maybe spread apart, but Mitzrayim represented the Yetzer Hara at that time. To destroy Mitzrayim meant to destroy the Yetzer Hara. So why was that a problem? And the Mefarshim explained, because the Jewish people never chose redemption for themselves. They never chose the redemption. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu had not come into history and stepped into history with Makkos, and the other reason why he did, by the way, did we have any schuyot for that? Did we deserve HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do the Makkos? No. Only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knowing the future, knowing his master plan for creation, made a point of obligating himself to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that somebody would still live after 4 generations that will go into the land and turn the lights on. He made a promise. So because of that promise, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did something very unconventional. He stepped into history 190 years early, and though he does not like to do overt miracles, turned the world upside down. There's 10 Makkos, Esser Makkos, destroyed Mitzrayim. The Zohar says prematurely, because the Mitzrayim had not even gotten to the point where it was worthy of destruction yet. It didn't feel its sa'at, as Zohar says, which is why by Yam Suf the Malachim were not allowed to sing praise about the destruction of the Mitzrayim, because they had not deserved it yet. They weren't Rishon Gemurim yet, which is why they can become Gary. There's all kinds of things, that come out of this in the end. But they were not even, because Baruch Hu didn't alter the rules, but he kind of broke some of the rules that he usually lives by, he usually functions by. Because he makes them, he can do whatever he wants. But he usually has a certain pattern of acting in this world to preserve free will. Because the point of Ma'aseh Bereshis is Bechira. And since we did not choose redemption, not at the beginning, not at the middle, and not at the end, by the time Makkos Bechoros came around, the Jewish people were not zoicha to lose their Bechira. Because the point of free will is to get to a point where you no longer have free will. Moshe Rabbeinu had no free will before he died, because he used his free will to get to a point of tremendous clarity, where everything he saw was a Kodesh Baruch Hu, everything he did was all Hashem Shamayim. He had no nisyonos anymore. There's no such thing as doing a chet. In fact, the Pri Tzaddik explains in Parshas I think it's Parshas Akiv. The Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu was made with Nun Mem Tes Shari The word was made with Nun Shari Bina, and Moshe Rabbeinu got 49 of them. So what about the 50th? So it says not until he died did he get the 50th. Moshe Rabbeinu turns to the Jewish people and says, you can get something I can't get. You can achieve something I can't achieve. What is that? The 50th gift of understanding, because that, Chazal say, is reserved for Bali Tshuva. But on his death, he got it. How do we know that? Chazal, like everything's so amazing and connected. It's like the answers are all there. He is. Where's he buried?
Where he says
We don't know.
Well, it's Mount. Well, you know what the mountain's called. And what does Nivo stand for? Nun Bo. That's the mountain he got the 50th at his death.
Was that like, he had like a Nishika? He was like...
What's Nishika? Nun Shaka. It's a drawing of the Nun.
Okay.
That's what Nishika is all about. Neder is Nun Dar, right? A Neder draws on the Nun. It lives there, so to speak. Right? Nun's all over the place. I would not be surprised it has to also do why there are 50 states. And if you're laughing, you're joking, think it's a side thing, let me show you something very interesting. It's not, it sounds a little bit ironic, but you have to understand, from a historical, Kabbalistic point of view, there's something going on over here. Edom, the color of Edom is red, right? So the Medrash talks about 3 aspects of Edom. And this is important because Yaakov is a twin brother of Esav, which means we can be like him. Just like he can be like us, we can be like him. So, he has a name, Esav Arasha. He's called Esav Arasha, and red is his color because he's born red and ruddy, and that becomes associated with Esav himself. There are 3 aspects to Esav. There's Esav the brute, Esav the thief, Esav the ganov, right? The guy who takes what he wants when he wants it with no remorse whatsoever, as the Medrash points out. There's Esav the religious guy, who comes and says to his father, how do you take matzah on straw and salt, which you don't, but he likes to make it look like you do, so it's like an artificial religion, so to speak. It looks like the religion, but it's not really religion in the end, right? Which you'll see there's an application to that too historically. And there's Esav the businessman. You know what his profession was? He was a lawyer. The Medrash says he was a lawyer. You used Esav to get off the hook when everything else failed, and he was always successful. That's what the Medrash says. 3 things in one person, but they broke up amongst his descendants, and they went 3 different directions. It's extremely ironic, very ironic, hugely ironic, that you have a country in the world that literally functions like Esav the brute, historically, that happens to be called Russia, and whose color happens to be red. It is, that's funny. That's too ironic over here. Just like money and man. It's like there's some things that the people who came up with the word money have. Let's call it money because man's in the word. No, but Ashkachik Kush Baruch Hu makes things happy. But he gives people the ideas to do things, to call themselves things, to do things. Basically, Kush Baruch Hu arranges so that we can step back and say, "Oh, that probably means this in the end." So that's Esav the brute historically. Russia, maybe Red China, even it's all over there, right? So then you have Esav the religious guy. Where did he go? Rome. It's the Catholic Church. What's their color? Also red. He also wears a kippah, havdil, but it's red, right? It's like and that's and it's like just like Esav. How do you meister straw? How do you meister salt? It's like religion, but not the real thing. It's exactly the same idea. You can be religious, serve God, and then do crusades and murder innocent.
That the businessman went to Rome too.
Not like America. Not like America, right? But America is unique. It's different than by Rome it's red, by Russia it's red. By America, it's red, white, and blue, with some stars in there as well. Right now, what's the blue doing there? What's the blue doing there?
Israel.
Right? So let's take a look. The Medrash says that Esav is like a chazer. What does he do? A chazer, pig has 2 split hooves, that his feet are split. So he puts them forward. The other siman that shows kashrus is inside. You can't see that. It's hidden away from view. But the hooves are out in the open. So he says, look, guys, I'm kosher. You can eat me too. Just like a cow. Right? And people get fooled by that. That's the whole point. The Medrash says people get fooled, conceptually. So, of all the cultures the Jewish people have ever gone to live amongst, to become a Russian, a communist, you have to really basically abandon Judaism. To become a Roman, you can't be frum and be a Roman at the same time. Like, let's go, Kef Shabbos and Motzi Shabbos for activity. Let's go watch the gladiators. Doesn't quite, flows. Doesn't really quite go. But America, it's amazing how comfortable you can be frum and be American too. And being a Canadian, you can see there's a difference. See, in Canada, we never really absorbed Canadian culture. The Frum community never really absorbed, like we're there, and just like, and most cultures, because Canada is not a melting pot. Canada goes out of its way to give you permission to preserve your culture living in Canada. The downside of it is there's no unity in the end. We have no sense of achdus that you have in America. No sense of, there's no real Canadian pride per se, a little bit here and there, but not like you have in America, which is, for a Frum Jew, good, because it allows you to stay loyal to Yiddishkeit while living in a foreign country. But in America, you see Frum Jews, basically, it can be totally Frum, but there's still a certain amount of Americanism that pervades, because it's comfortable, because they make it a place that you can actually live. That's the blue. And they even have stars, just like the Magen David. And then you have 50 states, not 51. There actually are more than 50 states, but we don't count them as states. But there's Puerto Rico, there's other places where there could have been states. Some say Canada, much to the chagrin of Canadians, right? But 50 states, that's a very, very significant number, especially since Mitzrayim means Meitzer Yam, the constriction. And it's amazing that you think about it, that the founding fathers of this country used the Bible, used the Torah, as the basis for the Constitution, and supported Jewish ideas. And Hebrew was mandatory in colleges, major colleges, until the 50s. The valedictorian was told, used to give us the address in Hebrew, because they wanted Hebrew to be able to give it over until the 50s. And they had on their money, "In God we trust," which is a phenomenally fantastic thing for the Gentile world. Unfortunately, the Jewish people get absorbed into that and say, you see, it's not as strange as you think it is. Much more kosher than you think. That may be the blue and the red, white, and blue in the end. But the main point is, in all of that, in all of it, in the whole discussion, there's obviously a lot of side issues here. But the main point is the Jewish people, by Makkos Bechoros, they were holding already in the level of Biyad Rama. They had left all the Tumah. We left Mitzrayim to preserve evil, so we could preserve free will and make a choice that we want to go back to the state of Geula. Which means the matzah does not commemorate what was accomplished. The matzah commemorates what was left undone. Every year, the seder, the matzah, it looks at us amongst this fantastic table. We have the gashmis, the beautiful silver, the plates, whatever, the food, and there's poor man's bread. Right in the middle of the entire thing, saying to you, it's nice, right? You have a good time, enjoy the food, enjoy all the fine dishes and wearing the nice clothes, but don't forget one thing, you're still in exile. Why? Why? If you're still in exile, it's because you have not made the choice to be redeemed. Your aleph is still lacking. Because if you're holding the level of an Adam, by definition, you'd be a free person, and the matzah would no longer be necessary, not the way we use it right now. So Sefiras HaOmer, therefore, this whole period of time, the whole union of Rabbi Kiva's Talmidim, and the idea of Leiv Tov really is just synonymous with the concept of Geula. A person, by definition, the same, for example, if a person has having a great day, you could be a moody person, but if you have a great day, you receive a birthday check or something like that, you feel very good, you become generous spirits, become nicer to the people. It's kind of hard to be mean to the people when people are being nice to you. When you're saying could be positive things, you tend to be more positive towards others. The fact that Rabbi Kiva's students, on some level, even if they were knowing up front, in the open, they were polite. These are Talmid Chachamim. These are people who worked on themselves on a daily basis. Because Baruch Hu's saying, but there was something lacking. Their Leiv Tov was not complete. It was not shalem in the ultimate sense. And since on their level it's so important, and their Rebbe is Rabbi Kiva, who says, you have to be on that level, and we know that that's the basis of Kabbalah's HaTorah, it's not going to work. That's galus. That's a galus mentality. If you're living in Geula, by definition, you'd reach the level of Ki'isha Chabalev Echad. So the question becomes, so why is it so important in the first place? It's a nice thing. It's a nice thing. Kisha Chabalev Echad and V'yachtar Chemocha and not having seen this Chidin. It's a nice thing, but why is it so important, so central to the whole concept of Kabbalah HaTorah and Cherus and all these things? Because it's brought down, by the way, that the Geula begins on Pesach and ends on Shavuos. And that's the reason why. And not only that, by the way, it's also brought down that the Pesach is going to be the Yom Tov Rishon, Shavuos is Yom Tov Sheni, the last day, and the Omer is like Chol HaMoed, connecting the entire time. It's like one big yantiv and a chag from Pesach until Shavuos. It's a very unique, concept over here. So why is it so central? So the Ramban brings down an interesting word on the mitzvah of Yetach Mocha. What is the essence of the mitzvah to love your neighbors yourself? What does that mitzvah really ask you to do? Is the mitzvah asking me to be chesedic, to be kind? We have other mitzvahs for that, he points out. Walk in Kosh Baruch Hu's ways, as Rambam points out. Just like he's chanun, you need to be chanun. He's rachum, you need to be rachum. There's all kinds of other mitzvahs we have that tell me, to give tzedakah. I have to lend money to my brother without ribbis. There's all kinds of mitzvahs that tell me that I have to be chesed. What does the mitzvah to love your neighbors yourself mean? In the end, especially since we know that it doesn't always mean give the thing that you want to somebody else. The famous mice in the Gemara with two people, with a canteen of water. Right? One canteen of water belongs to one person, enough water for one person to survive. What do you do? What do you do with that canteen of water? So the mitzvah to love your neighbor as yourself would say share the water. Just like you want the water, he wants the water, so share the water. If you share the water, you're both going to die. So that's one opinion. One opinion says share the water, so neither person has to see the other person die. Right? But Rabbi Kiva comes along, the one who says normally love your neighbors yourself, says no, but the Torah says v'chai b'hem. You have to live in the mitzvah. So therefore, the one who owns the canteen is mechuyev. He's obligated to drink the water, even though it means watching his friend die. That's the mitzvah. In that situation, in that scenario. Hopefully nobody will ever be tested like that, but that's the mitzvah. The Ramban says that that's the case. What does the mitzvah mean to love my neighbors myself? Because there's times clearly when Lamaisa doesn't work out that way. So he says, very, very fascinating. He says the mitzvah to love your neighbors yourself is a mitzvah to be objective. Not a mitzvah chesed. To be objective. Why? How did that come out? Because the basis of Kabbalah Torah is objectivity. I once walked behind a group of people who had just finished a shir, and the way it worked out, they were walking as I was walking out, and they were talking about the shir. I just gave over, going over some of the points. And it was totally astounding how 5 people had 5 different takes on what I said, and all of them were wrong. Or off. They missed the point. I stopped and said, that's not exactly what I meant, I wondered, how many other people? That's like the first 5, how many other people? And I wasn't clear. I tried so hard to be clear. And it's amazing. We're all sitting in this room together, and I'm assuming that what I have said, you have heard, and that you've heard the way I've meant it. But I have no idea, because you have your take on things, and your biases, and your biases. When you're subjective, we're always twisting stuff to make it work out. And it's astounding how people twist things. You can't believe how far people go to twist reality. You say, how did you get that? How did you get there in the end? Well, that's what subjective will do. We do it ourselves as well. We think we're hearing the truth, but it's being filtered through our own personal biases. That's the case with a fundamental problem. How do we know? I know Hashem gave the Torah, but how do I know that we received it? Loud and clear and accurately. How do I know that what Klal Yisrael got back at Har Sinai was in fact the Torah Shabbal Pek, as stuff was written down, right? But Torah Shabbal, how do I know? So Torah says, because one time, and one time only in history, way back at the beginning when it counted the most, the Jewish people got to the level of Kishach HaBalev Echad. Well, how does that tell me? Because Kishach HaBalev Echad means that everybody was equal in everybody's eyes. See, the moment I'm subjective for myself, I'm biased for me. The moment I'm subjective for you, I could want for you more than I want for myself, but I'm now being subjective for you. And therefore I'm also twisting the reality for your benefit in the end. But the moment I can love my neighbor as myself, says the Ramban, we're equal. When we're equal, nobody's biased, and everybody is objective. And that's why the Torah makes a big deal of saying, Ke'isha Balev Echad in advance of Har Sinai. To tell you that at Har Sinai, Kabbalah Torah, the Jewish people were holding on the level of love your neighbors yourself, which means they were objective, which means the Torah they heard is the one that God spoke. After that, it was written down and passed around. There's all kinds of distortions here and there. But the original Torah we received at the beginning, that was what Hashem gave over, because the Jewish people were raised at the level of Ke'isha Balev Echad. They achieved a Lev Tov, as a sphere is supposed to bring out. Now, it's interesting because you can always read, the details, the depths. The fact that the first 32 days equals the word Lev means that automatically after the seder, the beginning of the Omer automatically will create a leif for a person. The trouble is getting the tov part. That's the kisha chabalevachet part, right? To get a leif, everybody's got a heart, right? His heart is in the right place. Well, not always. People have hearts and they make mistakes. So, for example, Shaul HaMelech, he waited a few seconds too long. Even he was L'Shem Shemaim, by the way. He wasn't like being selfish. He had a svara for what he was doing over here. And he was a chacham. He was Yir Shemaim.
Right?
Want to bring karbanas, right? You can't bring karbanas as long as the Amalekis are gone. The moment you kill the last Amaleki, you have to destroy all the animals too. So he thought, I'll get around this. I'll make a loophole for L'Shem Shemaim. I'll keep one Amaleki alive, and I'll bring all the karbanas, and then I'll kill him after that. And that 1 second cost us Haman. And Amalek for the rest of history. You can have a heart, right? Matzah, as I say, the road to Gehenna is paved with good intention. And it really is, to a large degree. It's the Tov part. And the Tov, by the way, goes back to the Oregon News, which is called Tov. That's the clarity for Kosh Baruch Hu's light of Ma'aseh Bereshis. How do you get the Tov? So it's very interesting, because what's the threshold? It's Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the day that we cross that new realm called Tov. But that's Kabbalah. That's the Zohar. Who learns Kabbalah? Right? Besides Mekubalim. And some individuals. But for the most part, people say, don't touch that. That's hot. Right? That burns you. And it can, 100%. So then how does it work out? How do you get that? How do you get, let it be the Torah Shbal Peh or Musar, something it's tangible to all of us, the Leif Tov. Okay, so it's not basically now that everyone should go learn the Zohar at this point in time, but it means basically that if you want to get a Leif Tov, you have to go deep. There are 4 levels on which Torah exists: Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod, Pardes. The word paradise comes from the word Pardes, right? You knew that before? Because the first paradise was a Pardes. But it wasn't a Pardes just that was like an apple orchard. It was a Pardes where Adam knew Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the 4 levels of Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. That was his reality. And if you're going to live a superficial existence, take things for face value and not go deeper. Then ask the question, and keep going till you get to a real answer, you'll miss the Geula. Your Aleph will stay too small. You'll never experience true Cherus. And the Jewish people will have to unfortunately wait until Be'itah, the last possible moment for the Geula to come, which then usually comes with the war of Gog and Magog. We don't want that. We don't want that at all. Not on a personal level, not on a national level, not for the entire world. We'd rather have a Geula B'rachamim, a peaceful, merciful Geula. How do you do that? By building the Aleph. You build the Aleph, you join the Dam, you become a Dam, you become free. If enough people do that, right, you can create a tipping point, change the entire tide, the entire direction of history, and bring the Geula, the Shleimus, but B'rachamim at the same time. This is the period of time that we're supposed to focus on that, work on it, go deeper, ask yourself the question, what do I understand? How do I know it's true? And is there more to the story than I possibly could? I might be living at this point in time. The deeper you go, the more you draw that light down, the more you feed the Aleph, the more you become a Dam, and the more you experience freedom.